Hello, welcome to an in-depth dive into the June edition of the Physio Network. Particularly, I wanted to talk about the review done by Travis Pollen. Well done, Travis. I hope you're watching. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Clinical reasoning framework for thoracic spine exercise prescription in sport. And they did a systematic review and a bit of narrative on it. So what they did is they were saying that the literature is quite poor on thoracic in general, and they did a huge review of research to see what was out there. And basically what I would say this paper does well is it pulls in all the possible exercise prescriptions around mobility, strength, or work capacity they talk about, and they put it all into one place. Now, they reviewed 38 exercises in total. And what I love about this particular edition, as well as the paper, which I've got for you, is if you're a young health professional and you're looking to help someone in the thoracic spine region, whether they've got pain, injury, or they're looking for more performance, it divides it really well as gives you all the pictures of how to actually do it. So if you're at that stage of your career where you're looking for ideas and looking to expand your library, I found that this is what this paper is most helpful for. They divide it into mobility, which is like an easy one, thoracic extension, a bird dog, more those motor control. I would say the starting phase of someone who might have back pain, very low level. And then there's the harder exercise, which they called work capacity, endurance type exercises, and then strength, where you can see something like a deadlift. Now, what Travis says here is, according to the theory of regional interdependence, and that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. That regional interdependence model is very hard to prove. It's very hard to do good research on. I would love to hear if anyone who watches this has any quality research on regional interdependence. The theory being for young health professionals, let's say I'm a baseballer and I need to wind up. And if I don't have thoracic rotation, that's going to limit me here, which means I'm either not going to be able to generate as much power, or my shoulder has to do more work to get the torque. So that's a simple example of regional interdependence. And what they're saying here is we might want to prescribe more thoracic rotation for performance, because that may help someone get through a pitch. Or in the case of pain or injury, if I'm getting some kind of impingement, posterior impingement, then getting more movement from my thoracic, so my shoulder has to move less, could potentially be a good thing. But you can see how that would be very hard to do a quality study on, particularly with what we know now about all the factors in someone's cup that might lead to injury or performance. And it would be very hard to separate how much would a biomechanical improvement here help someone's pain or performance versus other things in the cup. So there's a few things to unpack there, which I really like. I'm going to talk a little bit more about practical examples, and what I thought I would do is bring up the actual paper so we can see the exercises. So this is a great paper. It's open source. It's in BMJ and it's 2020, so it's very modern. Again, if you're a young health professional looking to expand your library, they have most of the exercises in here with a bit of a narrative around it. Now, I would say the paper doesn't come to any great conclusions, but what it does do is it brings all the thoracic exercise prescription into one place. And what they have suggested is we now need to go and study, does mobility work with these exercises affect performance or pain? Or does strength work with these exercises affect performance and pain? And they couldn't do that until they had this paper. So just flicking back. This is really interesting for a young health professional for a few reasons. I think the biomechanical model, now this is just a theory I'm working on, hard to prove. I think the biomechanical model and regional interdependence could have more relevance in the athletic population, which is what they talk about. Again, if we think of that baseball pitcher, having an extra 2 to 5 degrees in their thoracic could mean the world of difference when you're performing at that level, particularly if we're talking about more torque or trying to reduce some pain or strain on the shoulder. Where this could be tricky, and I would say where we see clinically very often, is the mum and dad or the general population is, do they really need that extra 5 to 10 degrees? Or just because they're stiff in the thoracic, is that really the reason they've now got low back pain or neck pain? Now, that is the underlying theory of regional interdependence, but it is very hard to prove. So how do I approach this in the clinic? If someone comes to me with neck pain, shoulder pain, or low back pain, I generally start very local. I start by considering the person, the cup, and trying to figure out all the factors that could contribute. My acute phase would, I would say, look very standard. Some combination of education, exercise, and techniques to settle things down, whether that's manual therapy or rest or tape. And then when we move to, say, phase 2, so that they're calming down and we're trying to add some capacity, we're trying to build a bigger cup for this person. This is where you might start to consider regional interdependence. You might start to say, well, it's potential that you're getting shoulder pain because you don't have much thoracic extension. And a great example of this, if you've never done it, stand against a wall with your thoracic spine against the wall and try and lift your shoulder up. What you'll find is you get stuck here. You even start to feel some impingement because you can't extend through your thoracic, so your scapula can't rotate back, which means your humeral head can't get clearance. That is a process that we see very often in elderly populations. They're just stuck in thoracic kyphosis and they now can't get their arm up, and that can cause impingement. So how and when do we do this, and how evidence-based is it, is my challenge as a clinician. And how I weigh that up is, I think with a lot of patients, we can get them through the acute phase and we can add to their cup with global strengthening. And that will probably do the job for a lot of your patients. But when I'm in that visit, 4 to 5 or the middle stage, I always do take a look at regional interdependence. Someone's got shoulder pain, I will always take a look at their thoracic rotation and their thoracic extension, because I believe if someone's doing that often, if someone's doing thoracic extension daily, they're going to keep that movement. If someone never does that and they're at the desk 8 hours a day, we know that posture doesn't have links to pain and performance, but we know that if you sit like this 8 hours a day and don't do anything the other way, the chances are you'll probably adapt to this position. And then by the time you're 50, 60, 70, you're going to find it hard to get your arm up there. So for the young health professional trying to integrate this addition into practice, I would suggest do the things you normally do. Use this paper as a wonderful library. And because it's very hard to be black and white and evidence-based that regional interdependence does actually play a role in that person in front of you, in front of you's condition, what I would do is I would commit a small amount of time to it, but definitely address it. So I would do the other big things in their cup, build their global capacity, settle their pain down, talk about education, exercise, empowerment. But then I always do look at this, and I would just prescribe 1 or 2 things that I think would address some of their movement deficits, as long as they feel it's something they can do, as long as they feel it's achievable, and it doesn't mean they're now doing 5 or 6 exercises. And I would explain the potential benefits and, more importantly, how that links to their why. So, if they're a pitcher, that's an easy one. If they're a mum or dad and they've just kind of hurt their shoulder, you might want to explain that, we need to rotate to get, a kid in the car and do the seat up, or I just hurt myself putting the groceries away. So we could see how if I have more of this movement, there is a chance that I'm going to put less strain on my shoulder. So my takeaway for a young health professional, use this for a big library and start to consider regional interdependence, if you're not already, by just spending a little bit of time. How I weigh these things up that aren't really solidly proven in the evidence is I consider them. I consider them in a biomechanical model, and does that make sense? And then I'll commit 1 or 2 minutes to it. So yes, they're stiff in the thoracic. Yes, they're stiff in rotation. Are they having shoulder pain? Is there something I could give them that's not going to take up so much of their time or so much of the consult that could help their movement and link to their goals? So great review, great paper as a starting point to build up your exercise library. And I look forward to hearing your comments on it and how you approach the regional interdependence model.